Our lesson concerns a promise. A promise that God made to Abraham. Now, at the time of this promise, Abraham was still known as Abram. The word of the Lord came in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward. Despite the many victories that God had given Abram, he still had some reluctance about his relationship with God. God had promised him that he would father a great people, yet he and his wife Sarai remained childless. So, when God says to Abram, I am your shield, your very great reward, Abram responds, Sovereign Lord, what can you give me since I remain childless, and the one who will inherit my estate is Eleazar of Damascus? You have given me no children, so a servant in my household will be my heir. And then the word of the Lord came to Abram, this man will not be your heir. God says to him, but a son who is your own flesh and blood will be your heir. And then the Lord took Abram outside and he said, look at the sky and count the stars, if indeed you can count them. Then God said, so shall your offspring be. Then these words, Abram believed the Lord, and the Lord credited to him as righteousness. The need we have is to trust God. It's hard enough for us to trust anyone or anything these days. Our institutions are under attack. These are such difficult days. We need trust. No matter how difficult our circumstances, remember, God will never forget us, nor will God forsake us. Abram's faith was fragile, but God's promises are rock solid. We need to remember that. We do not always see how God will work things on our behalf, but God always delivers on his promises. Pastor Ray Stedman once told about a good friend of his from another country who, along with his wife, was going through a time of deep trouble. The wife was struggling with severe physical problems arising from asthma and bronchitis. If you've ever had difficulty breathing, and many of us have, you know how frightening that can be. This couple struggled for years with her condition. They longed to go back to their own country, but her sickness kept getting in the way. Well, one day, Ray Stedman reminded his friend, whose name was Mark, of the time when Jesus stilled the storm on the Sea of Galilee. Ray Stedman summed up the lesson from this story. Remember, Mark, he said, the boat will not sink and the storm will not last forever. That's what having faith is all about, remembering those facts. The boat will not sink and the storm will not last forever. Mark thanked Ray, they prayed together, and Mark left. Stedman did not see him for a couple of months, and then they ran into each other, and Ray asked, how are things going? How is your wife? Oh, Mark replied, no, not much better. She's still having terrible struggles. She can't breathe. She can't take care of the children. We're having a hard time. But I do remember two things that you said. The boat will not sink, and the storm will not last forever. They prayed again. Sometimes later, he received a note from Mark. Mark and his wife had been able to go back to their home country. There, they found the answer to his wife's difficulties. The doctors discovered a minor deficiency in her diet, which needed to be remedied. When that was done, the asthma and the bronchitis disappeared. She was in radiant health, and they were rejoicing. At the bottom of the note, Mark had written, the boat will not sink, and the storm will not last forever. I hope we can remember those helpful words. There come those times in our lives when we have difficulty holding on to God's promises, but God does not fail. We may not see how the plan will unfold, but God will never fail us. There is another statement of faith that I would like for us to hold on to. When James Hewitt was a small boy growing up in Pennsylvania, his family would often visit his grandparents who lived 9 miles away. One night while visiting, a thick fog settled over the hilly countryside before they started home. James Hewitt remembers being terrified. He asked his parents if they shouldn't go slower than they were. His mother said gently, "Don't worry, your father knows the way." You see, Hewitt recalls, Dad had walked that road when there was no gasoline during the war. He'd ridden on that blacktop his bicycle to court his mother. And for years, he had made these weekly trips to visit his own parents. His father knew the way. And Hewitt writes, "How often, when I can't see the road of life and have felt that familiar panic rising in my heart, I have heard the echo of my mother's words, 'Don't worry, your father knows the way.'" Good message for all of us. When life seems dark, when we don't see any possible way forward, remember our Heavenly Father knows the way. We can trust. God will not fail. What promises has God made to you? There are some promises that God has made to all of us. The promise to be with us through all of our life's journey. The promise to never forget us or forsake us. The promise to receive us into our heavenly home when we finish our journey on earth. Take God at His word. God has established a covenant with you and with me. Remember this covenant when we face challenges, when we come up against hard times. Hold on to God's promises and don't lose faith. If it helps, hold on to these simple phrases. The boat will not sink, and the storm will not last forever, and your Father knows the way. Even better, remember God's words to Abram. Look out and count the stars, if indeed you can count them. So shall your offspring be. God always keeps His promise. Thanks be to God. Let us come to the table of our Lord.